Have a seat.
I'm not used to I'm not used to sitting before the judge. I apologize.
Enjoy it while you can.
That's right. Thank you, Your Honor. Good looking crowd. Thank y'all for being here while the other
No campaigning while you're up here. Good try, but okay, I have 4 questions. These questions were hermetically sealed in a mayonnaise jar on Funkin' Wagnall's doorstep. So the question number 1, which you will have 2 minutes to answer. Texas, being a border state, as well as having thriving ports, as well as controlling outer space travel, as well as owning the largest biocontainment lab in the world, has some security issues. What are your plans to improve and maintain the security of the sovereign state of Texas and the United States?
One of my main issues is borders. I focused on BEE, Borders, Energy, and Economy, which all 3 of those were mentioned in the assets that you were listing there that Texas has. We have got to control our borders. Now, some have said we need to put machine guns and barbed wire on the border, and some have said we need to give the illegals amnesty. I can't, and they say they can't go for either one of those. You can't get them to agree on it. I think we should be able to agree that if someone is here illegally, we give them an opportunity to sign a guest register and know why they're here, and they can be a guest, but we don't adopt them. They don't become family. They don't become citizens. They're not entitled to benefits, but I don't want them here illegally, and we don't know who they are or where they are. That would reduce the number of people that are hiding in the shadows, and we can find out who is here. But we have got to close the borders. Now, some people argue that a fence is too expensive. I heard a figure of $30 billion. That's a small amount for security. If that's all it took, I'd say let's do it. But a fence may not be the only method we need to have. We've got to have whatever method, and our military knows how to shut down a border. We need to control our border and know who's here, because Al-Qaeda and other Arab nations are sending spies over here. They're working on the borders. They're teaching tunneling techniques to the drug cartels in exchange for money to fund their war against us. We cannot have that. We cannot have people crossing our borders illegally.
Question number 2. Oil, black gold, Texas tea. Even Jed Clampett understood the power of oil and natural gas in today's society. Texas sits on some of the largest oil and gas reserves in the world. Our Gulf is dotted with thousands of oil rigs. Our refineries distill millions of gallons of gasoline and fuel. As Congressman from the 14th District of Texas, what energy policy will you support?
I support free energy. I want drilling. We need to use every resource we have to produce energy. Energy is something that the Arab states hold over our heads and keep us in bondage to them. And we're borrowing money from China to finance it. Salt used to have that same capacity. Salt, if a nation controlled salt, they controlled tremendous political power. Now, with refrigeration and technology, we've made salt just a seasoning. We need to do the same thing with oil. But we need to drill and we need to obtain the oil that's here in the Gulf. We don't need to be giving billions of dollars to Brazil and telling them, we'll be your best customer. You can drill in our Gulf, the Brazilians, but we can't drill in the Gulf. That's just insanity. And the XL pipeline, that should have been a no-brainer. You know, a quarter of the oil that was going to come through the XL pipeline was U.S. oil that's stored in facilities in Oklahoma and the Dakotas. And the oil sands, they need to come down here. We have the facilities to extract that in this district. But instead, with the action of the president saying we can't have the XL pipeline, the oil will be shipped to China. China will pay for that pipeline across Canada, and we've got to turn that around. We've got to have some people that are reasonable about this, and I will be relentlessly reasonable in my push for oil and for every energy option we have. But we don't need to be subsidizing programs that don't have any viability. We need to turn that research back over to universities.
Question 3. The current president and the past Congress shoved a health care policy down our throats that is wasteful and unconstitutional. If elected, what specific steps will you take to not just undo this catastrophe, but to provide the world's best health care policy?
It's the tragedy of the commons. If you know economics, it's called the tragedy of the commons. When you have a common area and nobody's responsible for it, it gets used up. If you put something out that's free for the taking, people waste it. But when you give people ownership of something, they tend to take care of it. If you had a public pool and it's nobody's responsibility, it's nobody has ownership of it, then people don't care for it. But if you have some ownership of whatever it is, that you may share it with other people, but you have to have some buy-in, some ownership of that to take care of it. So, you know, the same with medical. One of the things is tort reform. We've done some of that in Texas. We need to have stronger teeth about lawyers bringing frivolous lawsuits against medical doctors that are doing the best they can. I would love to have some kind of a ironclad legal document that I could sign to a doctor. Now, I want to check him out. Where'd you go to school? Let me see your diploma. You know, what were your grades? And that would be a good thing. But I would sign that contract and say, I trust you to do this surgery, or I don't trust you to do this surgery. And if I trust you with a knife while I'm asleep, then if you make a mistake, I will not hold you responsible for it. I mean, that sounds harsh, but we have got it to where nobody has any personal responsibility for anything, and they sue for everything, like a cup of coffee from McDonald's. And you have to put a symbol on the lawnmower that says you don't use it for hedge flippers. You know, we used to let these catastrophes just take people out of the gene pool. You know, and that sounds harsh, but some people are just too stupid. And we are not, you know, if you hold everybody's hand, then they expect you to hold their hand. If you tell them everything what to do, they eventually stop thinking for themselves. And if they don't see a sign, they can't make a decision on their own. So we need to get the government out of health care and let the doctors and the patients work it out.
Question 4. Economics deals with unlimited demand and limited supply. Our country's current handling of our government's budget does not reflect the understanding of a limited supply. CD14 has its share of special projects, also known as earmarks or pork. How will you balance the needs of your constituents against the need for a balanced budget?
Very good. Well, there are things that the federal government needs to be involved in, and there are things that it does not need to be involved in. One thing is we have a shortage of water in this state. The recent drought showed us just a little sampling of that, but we have a continued drought. We're going to be in real trouble here. We have to desalinate Gulf water, or be ready to, or it will be too late to build the desalination plants. We have what, 1,500 people roughly moving here every day? They have water needs. And there's lots of studies done on conserving water, but conservation alone will not do it. We have a need for water, a basic need just like we do for air. And if we don't plan for those things, we're in trouble. Deepening and widening of the port channels, some of the infrastructure to get that cargo that comes into those ports up and out and around Houston and out to the other parts of the country. The federal government has responsibility to be involved in some of those things, but it doesn't need to get involved in little business dealings in public schools and in our medical care with our doctor. There's things that the federal government needs to be involved in and does not need to be involved in, and there's things that are just unconstitutional that the government is involved in. So that's the way I would do it. I would get the federal government out as much as possible of what they don't need to be involved in.
Thank you, sir.